balanced way. And, it wasn't any kind of, she didn't have a real agenda, I don't think.
Sorry, so I think I missed that. I was preoccupied. What was the issue with her? I assume she did a trip around Israel from looking at the title. What's the story really about?
Well, what happens is, of course, she, starts off in the position of, being the, very, progressive and, believing, a lot of left-wing, ideologies. And, so she
becomes another convert for the conservatives.
She takes her birthright trip and learns, some more information about the situation. And it is as she fairly presents it. It's a very complicated situation. It's very complex. There's a lot of issues going on, and it's hard to make any kind of black and white choices and about this and decisions about this. And she doesn't make any hard judgments, and I think she's very fair and balanced about her information. More people coming in, and I liked learning some of the history stuff I didn't know about. I thought that was a lot of fun. Thought her cartooning was adequate. I mean, she's not a splashy artist. She doesn't knock you out, but perfectly fine.
I mean, there were a couple of times I got confused who was who, because her drawing abilities are not like, they're, I mean, sometimes I was getting confused. I mean, there's a lot of characters, and sometimes it was like, wait, who is he Gil? Is he a soldier? Because there weren't like that many distinguishing characteristics on some of the characters. So I did get a little confused at times as far as who is who.
But well, maybe.
But as someone who has read a lot about the history of Israel, I think it's pretty basic when it comes. I mean, and that's not a knock on her, because that's really not what the book is about, despite the misleading title. It's just about her personal experience, a birthright experience, and that part I found valuable. I'm like, oh, okay, I got a little sense of like. I mean, different countries have things like this. Like in Korea, they have these trips where Korean students from all over the world will like go and spend some time like traveling and sometimes going to university. And this felt very much like that, except with Israel, you have a very special situation because the country is not that old, and it does have a fraught history, and it's very recent, and it's very real, and the existential threat is constant. So that's the difference, and you felt that. But in terms of like, there was a lot of stuff that I was very skeptical about. Like, she seems like an educated, smart person, and I would have thought that she would have read or knew a lot more before making this trip than it seemed like she was making it out. It sounded like she just had a lot of left-wing pablum going in. And maybe it's more complicated than I thought. I'm skeptical about, how honest she is about that, but it's fine.
Yeah, I don't think there was a goal of converting anybody to any position at all in her doing this book. I don't think there was an agenda of, trying to propagandize for one side or the other. It was just a personal journey that she took, and was interesting, and it was worth reading.
Throw my bit in. I've been to probably over 70 countries or more. And when I went to Israel in 2004, it was a bit of an afterthought. I actually had planned to go to Syria, and they wouldn't let me in for some reason. I've been there before, but anyhow, the point I want to make is that I ended up in Israel, and of the 70-odd countries that I've been to, it's one of the more interesting countries in the world. I was absolutely enchanted by the fact that it was a new country, but it had its own identity, a very strong commitment to each other, very strong bond, a family bond. And what really impacted on me was going to the Yad Vashem. The Yad Vashem is the Holocaust Museum. And, any tourist that goes to Jerusalem goes there. And I'm just mentioning it. I'd just like to, it might help the conversation. I don't know. Anyway, so I went into the Yad Vashem, as all good tourists do. And I sort of walked around, and I noticed also groups of IDF people, Israeli Defense Force going through in groups. And it turned out that if you join the IDF, there's a very good chance that you'll be taken through this museum. So what you're doing, you're imprinting something into the people. You're imprinting something about the history, a rather unpleasant history. And so that was the first thing. Eventually I made my way around to a room, and there was a room there with 3 posters on it. And the posters talked of why Canada, America, and Australia didn't take refugees through World War II. And and that was where I really got floored by that, because the Americans said, we won't take Jewish refugees because we will not discriminate based on religious grounds. Assholes. Anyway, 2, the Canadians, I can't remember. But of course, coming from Australia, I took particular note of Australia. Australia said, we won't take refugees because we don't have a racial problem in this country, nor do we wish to import one. And I thought, whoa, Dr. Goebbels, at that time, the Minister for Propaganda, would have been delighted, because he was promoting, the idea of, that the Jews were a separate race. So Australia picked that up. Anyway, the point I want to make is not so much about the actual content. It's this, is that if you were living in Israel and you went in, all the males, and in fact women as well, have to go through and do compulsory service. If you go through the museum and you see that, what's your attitude going to be? What's your attitude going to be to the world? You can't trust the world. You're surrounded by people that want to push you out into the sea. You're surrounded, with a history of countries that, took that attitude during World War II. You're going to be self-reliant. You're going to say, up you, rest of the world, we're Israel, and we're going to take care of ourselves. And that was the other point I want to lead to. The other thing that they have is a very strong connection to the Masada. The Masada is this fort, which used to be King Herod's palace. And
very, very famous, yes. Vespasian was a Roman general who initially assaulted it, yeah.
Yeah. And about 70 AD, they had a revolt against the Roman occupiers, and they decided they fought to the last man, and then there were 10 of them, and they drew lots to decide who was going to be the last man, and who had to then commit suicide. The point I want to make there is they'll fight to the last man. And that is also part of the IDF. And you see some of the military units have got a little symbol of the Masada on their, I think it's a little brooch or a pin or something that they wear. So I'm just trying to make a point. There's 2 very, very strong features of the Israelis. Is, we're on our own and we'll fight to the last man. And that really pervades that culture. I just wanted to just throw that into the conversation. I don't know whether it's a red herring or not, but it certainly impacted on me. So, David, you did that last time on me, mate. When I was talking, you disappeared. You've done the same thing to me. I'm starting to wonder about you. Or is it me?
No, I think the last time I was on with you, I had the wrong computer, though. So.
All right. I don't know whether you heard what I was saying there, but...
No, I heard you. I was.
No, oh, good. Anyway, I just thought, that's something about the Israelis we need to recognize. These are people that they're on their own. And they feel it, and you get that sense. Amazing culture, very much like Germany in terms of professionalism, very committed, very thorough. Everywhere you go, you get that feeling. It's amazing. It's worth a visit that country just to get a sense of that. And anyway,
I don't know how much they'd like to be compared to Germany. So that's an interesting comparison. But to follow up on what you said, I was surprised that in the book, she, at least as part of her birthright experience, that there wasn't more talk about the miracles that Israel is, that all of not just everything that they've, the hardships that they had overcome, but just the incredible development and the rapidity of the development to take what it was and turn it into not just a first world country, but ahead of many first world countries in a number of areas. This is my IDF bracelet. That's how pro-Israeli I am, because I do think it's one of the few miracle countries out there in terms of what they do. I think they have, behind the US, I think they have the third most high-tech patents that are developed in the world, which is just remarkable considering that they have 2% of the population of the US. What they've done with irrigation has been a miracle. What they've done with desalination is a miracle. Like, it's just an incredible country. Like, they recycle 86% of their water. We recycle less than 1% of our water. Like, they're just a remarkable country. They just solve problem after problem after problem. They punch way, way above its weight. And I thought there'd be more of that in her birthright experience, and I was surprised that there wasn't there wasn't more like what I would think of as like positive propaganda or something, because there's a lot to be positive about in that country.
I thought it was I would say very unpretentious. It was just a very, just an ordinary person's experience taking this journey and what she felt about it and how she feels about it. It's just very relatable. It's very, common for anybody to be able to empathize with her position. Yeah, true. Maybe she didn't have a great deal of knowledge in depth before going, but then, gradually comes to learn more information about it and does so in a way that is relatable to anybody. Yeah, we've all had those experiences, I think. And I thought it was a very gentle approach to this material. And I think it got across a lot of the idea, the experience that she was having. There is certainly I've never been to Israel, but you can still get the feeling of certain grandeur and majesty and all these places that she was visiting, and you get the idea of the emotional experience it must have been for her. There's a lot of themes in the book too, about the talk at the end, which I just thought was great, from when she went to see the talk from the rabbi, which I thought was really wonderful. I thought there were a lot of things that I found resonant with me on a personal level, actually. Be happy.
Funny though, I have to say, I'm not knocking the idea, but I remember probably about 20 years ago or something, I ran into, in the little theme thing, I ran into an Israeli family. They'd migrated to Australia, and, they had, their teenage daughters, and the teenage daughters were telling me that really for them, their whole life in Israel was an unhappy experience. She said it was, the impression she gave me, a very, very arrogant culture. This is interesting. I'm not knocking Israel, but I'm saying there's somebody who had been brought up there and had a very different view of the place. Now, of course, I know another guy who's a local, and he's quite famous, and he went back to do his service in the army in Israel, even though he's an Australian, and he's an absolute fanatic for Israel, But yeah, she was sort of knocking the place and saying it was really, she said, comparing Australia was laid back, people were friendly, but she felt in Israel people were very sort of arrogant and very much looking out for themselves. It was her impression. Interesting.
Well, that, Stephen, is brings it back to my point. If you live there, and look, I went to Israel partly because the Israelis I was meeting in India, they were, as you described, extremely arrogant, extremely bombastic. I got a sense of who they were when I was in Peru, and in Peru there was a couple of ladies who were beset upon by 3 or 4 local men. And those 3 or 4 local men ended up in hospital. 2 of them were, because they were IDF women, you know, they had been in the Israeli Defense Force. You know, you don't fuck around with them. You know, these are people that are you know, they're living out Nietzsche's living on the side of Mount Vesuvius. You know, you've got to take care of yourself. And that's why I went there. I wanted to feel it for myself. And when I went there, I thought, yeah, if I lived in Israel, I would be like them. And you would start to think, look, we're on our own. You know, we're on the side of a volcano. It can explode any time. We've got to take care of ourselves. And that's why I think what Richard was saying was, you know, so right. You know, they've only got one focus. In Australia, look, it's lotus land here. You know, we just pluck stuff out of the ground, stick it on ships and move it out. It's a really soft country. Yeah, you feel but you've got to tune in. You've got to tune in. If you want to be an Israeli, you live by the Israeli standards, or else you'll feel as you described. But the bonding of Israelis is quite amazing. I spent time with a family there. And, you know, whenever there's a problem, when there's a terrorist attack, they get phone calls from all around the world asking, how are you? You know, have you got, you know, there's sort of this togetherness. And it's promoted. It's like, as I said, the visit to the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, the Masada pin, the whole attitude, everything is about being together. You know, you're either in or you're out.
Actually, yeah, that was one thing that I wanted to note about the book, because I think that's a theme, actually, is connection with your people, whoever your people might be, and how hard it is to find that connection in the modern world today. We're kind of disconnected from any kind of larger group or larger tradition or larger heritage. And I think there was some part of that in her story, that she was struggling with that. And I think in a large way, we all are kind of. We've all, by the modern condition, has kind of disconnected us from that kind. And I think that is there. That is there in the story. It's kind of, you know, she does talk a little bit about that. You know, she was, you know, she's Jewish, but she's never been particularly religious and never been particularly raised in the whole rigmarole of it all. And yeah, that causes a little bit of struggle. But I think in a large way, we all are kind of struggling with that. I think it's part of the modern condition. That's the sense I got. So.
I do think there's something unique about the Jewish experience. And the Holocaust was not that long ago. And never in the course of human history has a group experienced an existential loss like that, a genocidal event. And
I'd say that's untrue.
Wait, hold on. I didn't finish my sentence. And rebounded like they have. There's no group that has rebounded like that. And that is, again, part of the miracle, to me, of Israel. It's a very unique situation. I half joke with some of my Jewish friends, like, why aren't they making Aliyah? Because if I were Jewish, I would think I would feel a very strong pull to that country, because this is very recent history. It's very recent history where, you know, they were almost wiped out. So
actually, that you might find other examples in history. One example would be the Vandals in Roman times. You follow their story. It's off the charts. A story of survival, which is literally off the charts. So we're driven by the Huns into the Roman Empire, you know, just fighting all the way down through Gaul into Spain, through North Africa, and they ended up taking a rich province. The Eastern Roman, or the Byzantines, as they often call them, sent in, you know, their whole fleet to wipe the Vandals out, and the Vandals defeated them. So they clobbered the Western Romans and the Eastern Romans, and kept that territory for a few generations. But there'd be others, I think.
I did wonder about the Yad Vashem, the Holocaust Museum, because to be quite frank, I really felt that they needed to destroy it rather than preserve it. I felt they need to move on. They've got this pain body, this enormous pain body of what the world did to them. My parents suffered terribly during the war. My dad was taken by the Germans, made to work in a German factory, and he had his education through. He was basically sort of taken out of circulation for 4 years, but he moved on. When he never talked, well, if he talked about the Germans, he'd talk of them as a polite, good people. He didn't carry it on. And I kept wondering whether that attitude of the Yad Vashem, however, you might make a case and say, look, this is to remind us of what can happen. Yeah, but it might also be a time to move on because it's shaping the culture.
But they do move on. They do move on. It doesn't hold them back. But again, Jewish history is it's unique. I mean, this is a people that have been persecuted everywhere they've gone. And the reason why the Zionist movement and why Israel exists is they finally realize, oh, we really need a place of our own, because everywhere we go, at a certain point, people try to wipe us out. And so we need to remember that, but we move on. I mean, the country has not been held back by this memory, you know. I mean, I think you make a good point in terms of like, at an individual level, if you think of yourself as a victim throughout life, it's going to be very hard to move on. But as a nation, it's important to like, you don't want to ever forget something that was so horrific. And again, this happened in modern times, in supposedly one of the most civilized, Germany was like at the height of civilized Europe at that time. I mean, this is a country that was producing Wagner and Beethoven, and it just like, this was at the height, and yet, they went ahead.
You think it's unusual?
No. It's not unusual throughout history. You just have massacres all over the place. But what it was there was this idea that Europeans had of themselves, that they had become civilized. That they were like this civilizational culture, that suddenly nation states had been created with actual leviathans as governments and laws, rule of law, all of that. And you have to remember,
just like the Anglo-Saxons until recent times. The Anglo-Saxons had an enormously high opinion of themselves.
Sure.
The American nation, and all the other one, the British Commonwealth, and they've been the top dog. They've had the best that the world's had to offer for the last couple of centuries. But think what they like when the wind's no longer blowing their way so well anymore. I expect it's not going to be such a nice image anymore.
So mentioning the Anglo-Saxons is a good example, and actually proves my point, which is the Anglo-Saxons have committed all sorts of massacres to lots of groups, and those groups have not been able to rebound. And in fact, you can make a case that a lot of those groups keep talking about their victimization and yet are not able to move forward. And that's not the case with Israel. Israel remembers, but they continue to move forward and advance further than large first world countries.
But Israel has gone beyond the green line. Not that I'm against Israel, but they have broken what was the rule. They've moved in to settle what was established as Palestinian lands, and they're gradually taking it away. So that's not moral.
But Richard, I think the point you make, I think you're collapsing two issues. I think, yes, Israel has got a dynamic. It is an extraordinary country. It is, I find it quite fascinating that a country that's only, 70 years old, it has a dairying industry so effective that the Australians sent their dairy farmers to do, we've been around for a couple of centuries to discover how the Israelis can produce twice as much milk per cow as we can. That's just taking a silly example. But the point is, everything that you say...
What about the poor cows?
But But the thing that concerns me is you are preserving something of a discomfort from the past. Why don't you move on and be in the present moment? Why do you, I mean, but if you must keep that museum going, why do you force your military to go in? And you can say, yeah, but you got to remind them of what can happen. I think it's also you're creating this bombastic culture, because it is a bombastic culture. It's extremely arrogant, extremely. You feel it everywhere.
I just have a very different experience with Israelis. I just have a very different experience.
No, I think they're wonderful people. I'm not diminishing them, but there is still this incredible, self, don't fuck around with us people. They're wonderful, lovely people, love them, had wonderful conversations with them. But deep down, you sense that pain body pulsing away. That was my experience. I don't know. Was that a conversation stopper? Oh, well.
I don't have much to say to that. I mean, to each his own. I admire the culture so much, and I think that's an event, an historical event that you need to remember, and it's an event that binds the country, and it's a country that's surrounded by enemies, and it faces real existential threats, and you need to remember, you need to remain vigilant, and if that means there's a certain amount of arrogance and aggression that comes with it, so be it.
So why they don't never get on with the Greeks? The Jews never get on with the Greeks.
I noticed that the Israelis are going to, or promoting to the Rwandans to set up a Holocaust museum over there. They're saying there are people over there to preserve. Now, what's the difference between a Hutu and a Tutsi? Hutu and a Tutsi? Yeah, Hutu and Tutsi. Was there something about the length of the nose or something? It was so into, they want to go and set up a Holocaust museum over there. Preserving, what are you doing? You're preserving a divide. Move on. I don't know.
I'm going to have to go and visit the local one. I think there's one in Melbourne. There's a Holocaust museum. I'm intrigued now.
No, I got to say, I think everything that Richard said, yes, tick all of that, but there is something about preserving the past that I think is unhealthy, just like Australia's doing there, Stephen. It's a religion in this country. We don't have, we build a religion around the military challenges that we've had in the past. It's a culture, and I don't think it's healthy. I think we need to be in the present moment. This is 2020.
Yeah, but who's we, pale face? So this is the thing. Everyone's different. I love the military tradition of Australia. To me, it's bread and butter for my soul. For you, it's rubbish. See, we're all different. You can't say that's just one trip that's going to fit everybody. I know the left. I used to be a leftist, and so I know the mind. It was probably only 10 years ago I'd started becoming conservative, and I noticed that's the thing with the left. They believe in this universal measure that somewhere floating up in space is this measure which we all can live by. And that's their thing. And to me, it's erroneous. We're all different.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's hard to argue against that point, but yeah, it's hard to see why so many people do. I mean, we've had like psychology and, things like character typing and Myers-Briggs typologies, that people have different character and personality and orientations and drives and desires and preferences.
Well, at least we end up like the ants in the Once and Future King. What were the ants saying? Everything that is not forbidden is compulsory.
Yeah.
I think that's one of the tensions that Sarah Glidden has in this book. Is she goes on her birthright mission. She's a leftist. She has a leftist ideology. I'm sure she comes from a place of nonviolence. And she struggles when she goes on this trip to Israel because she's thinking of Israel being this occupying force, and yet she's confronted with the reality of this existential purpose of just survival that the Jews in Israel had to actually be able to fight, and for her leftist background, that was something that caused her a lot of conflict.
Do you want to, you've raised the point about, I think, was it Stephen who was talking about the stepping over the green line, that, you know, they're stepping into Palestinian lands and how they're snubbing.
Well, they have broken a rule there. I'm not saying I'm against them doing that, but you can't really stand there and say, oh, we're being completely moral, when in fact they've allowed settlers to cross that line. That was, you know, the Green Line was the one that was established, was it 1948, 1949, after the post World War II conflict. And of course, they've, you know, they gained control of those territories in the '67 war, and very quickly settlers were going across the line, and quite literally, they're snatching the land of another people. Now, I'm not saying that's wrong, but it is wrong from the perspective, the moral perspective that they're presenting.
Yeah, I thought she was very fair about it. You know, I mean, she certainly gave the guy, first prime minister, a long scene where he relates, I think those were authentic quotes from him talking about it.
I mean, I think it's amazing that the country has something like 1.5 million Arabs living within its boundaries. You know, 1.5 million Arabs that are not putting on suicide vests, you know, explosive belts, going around practicing terrorism, with a standard of living that maybe 3-4 times what it would be across the green line. You've got to ask yourself, you know, what's wrong with them assimilating this other territory, and what is assimilation anyway? It's a form of nationalism. I mean, it's a failed state, isn't it? I mean, what future has the West Bank and Gaza got? Goodness sake, move on, people.
Well, yeah.
The Israeli Arabs were there since the ones inside what became Israel in '48, and yeah, initially for a long time they were very loyal to the Israeli state, but I think there are ethnic tensions are starting to surface now as the country becomes increasingly heavily populated.
I mean, I think the Arabs within Israel are extremely fairly treated. I mean, they have the same rights as Israeli citizens, but for one point, and that is all citizens of Israel must do IDF service, military conscription, you know, which is about 2 to 2.5 years, but they give an exemption to the Arabs. Well, not entirely, it's up to them. They can make a choice. They can make a choice. You can either join do your military service and get an identity card, which has you with a number and at the same status of every other Israeli. If you don't want to do that, yes, you'll have your card marked Arab and you'll have difficulty getting into your nightclubs. And I mean, that point was brought home when I was sitting on a rooftop having some beers with some Arabs, and they said to me, you know, you can go into, and you know, we were sitting on the rooftop, and he says, you can go down to that nightclub, we can't. And that was my welcome to Israel. I said, wow, that's terrible. That's horrible discrimination. And then I asked him a few questions, and then that what I just described became apparent. And I said, well, you can't have it both ways. And he said, well, we can't do military service and fight against our brothers. Well, I said, for God's sake, make a choice. If that's your attitude, then, you know, this is not your country then. I mean, you either join in or you don't. You know, you can't have it both ways. So I felt it was very reasonable of the Israelis to have that choice, make a call.
So
Walter, can I
the-
interject here?
Yes.
Hi, guys. Hi, David.
Hi, Sana.
Well, this is the case in Israel. It's the case even in the Arab world. Like in Syria, for example, in the old days, Jewish Syrians, they had the choice to not be included in the military service for the same reason that if they didn't feel like fighting fellow Jews, although it's not the same citizenship, but the same religion. So it's nothing new. So you can be a citizen of a country and be exempt from the service for whatever reason, whether it's religion or ethnicity. So it's not uncommon in that area. It's actually how they dealt with the problem, because there is multiple ethnicities that crisscross between the countries. So even the Arab world has a lot of Jewish that still live there to today. Like in Bahrain, the Bahraini ambassador to the US is Jewish. So this was kind of a quick solution to the military service, because each of those countries require all able male to serve, I think, something between 6 months to 2 years. So you don't have to join the military. You don't need to make a choice between fighting somebody of your religion or your ethnicity and not go to a nightclub. You can be a citizen of that country. And if you're a pacifist, for example, and you don't want to be a part of a military campaign, you need to have the choice. I'll remind you of Muhammad Ali. He didn't want to go to Vietnam, and that doesn't make him less of a US citizen. That's my take on it.
And I believe Druids also have that option, and a lot of Druids actually do serve in the IDF in Israel.
That's true. Druids do the same way. That's true.
So I was wondering, some input from the illustrated book. You know, what was the things it was coming up with? Now I'm rather curious now. Yeah, because I haven't. Yeah. If you sent the download, I might have a look at it actually.
I can send it to you. It'll take me a few minutes, but I can.
Oh, don't worry about it then. Yeah, if it's too much trouble. Yeah.
Oh no. Well, I was gonna say I can bring it up if anybody wants to. Let me see. Here we go. Okay, share screen. There we go. There we go. Now, of course, there's a lot to, but one thing I do want to, because I just loved near the end. It's not at the real end, but this talk with the rabbi. It's just such a wonderful sequence that I just want to go through it. He says, someone once told me that the key to a happy marriage is to bring your wife flowers every month. Here we go. But isn't it more important to be a person capable of loving married life? And so it is the same with the halakha, the Jewish law. It's not enough just to read the right prayers at the right time. Are you reciting the Haggadah to let God know what's written in there? Or are you understanding what it means to be free? The Torah speaks of how the enslaved Jewish people escaped the oppression of the Egyptians. But how do we justify that the Torah also tells us that this kind of treatment is acceptable for non-Jews, that you may treat a misbehaving Arab slave with rigor? These are ancient laws written by men, but those who are truly pious, who truly love God, will surpass this with wisdom and sensitivity. The law allows it, but you must go beyond the law to find God. If you remain within the law, you are a pagan. These are laws that must be stricken from the Talmud, laws made during wartime to justify acts against their enemies. Unless we have the courage to change these ugly laws, we are destroying our own faith. The difference between Jew and non-Jew does not exist. We are all members of the human condition. If you are a religious Jew or doctor on seeing a Palestinian injured on the side of the road, you should not have to think about whether or not to help him. He is the same as you. And I guess we can stop there. But well, there's a few more here. Some people say I'm part of the liberal left. I'm no such thing. I'm a religious Jew. Why should caring about your fellow man be labeled left-wing liberalism? As a Jewish state, Israel should be leading the protests of the atrocities in Darfur. We pray for 2 kidnapped Israeli soldiers. But why can't we pray for 1 million Africans? We must get out of this family mode. The law is a compromise for those who cannot hear the universal language. It is not the ideal. Halakha is only the beginning. So bring flowers, but don't only bring flowers. Oh, there we go. Okay. I really took a lot out of that one, that sequence.
And sound a bit like Jesus.
Yeah, the thing, there's no difference between a Jew and a non-Jew. We're all part of the human condition. I say things like that all the time, but nobody listens to me. It's different when it's coming out of the mouth of a rabbi.
Yes, I unfortunately have departed from that idealism. I think I probably take the attitude that Nietzsche had, that, you know, humanism views humanity as somehow being essentially good, except that sometimes something gets in the way of that. And I think Nietzsche's position is humanity is good at one thing, that's being humanity, and human, all too human. I think we have all the different characters. There's a part of us which is Jesus and a saint, and there's a part of us that's a devil. And we falsely assume that we're the good guy. There is a nice side to us, but you know, I'm behaviourist in my attitude, and I just think it's we're doing it for our own advantage. We will behave morally within a social group for the advantage it confers on us, but we sort of, you know, pat our heads and say, "Oh, I'm a good fellow, aren't I?" And yeah, I think I've gone in a different direction. I don't know what Nietzsche's thoughts on that would be. I haven't studied him closely enough, I think, but
Yeah, evil never recognizes itself.
yeah, well, you know, the religious, of course, have this grand scheme of things that good will triumph over evil, and I'm just disinclined to look at things that way. I mean, I'll go with Dostoevsky. I think, you know, they often talk about Hannah Arendt's outlook that, you know, there's no such thing as good or bad people, simply people that do good or bad things. And of course, that's really comes from Dostoevsky, I believe, yeah. My only moral quality, I suppose, that I really believe in, I'm very much a stickler for keeping my word or enacting the truth. You know, I try to live with that one. That's why, I don't know, maybe I should go and be an absolute liar, but I find falsehood aesthetically displeasing. So for me, morality and beauty come together. As I think that's a bit of Nietzsche as well, isn't it? Really, that to him, the inspiration for morality is beauty. You know, the Christian culture, for example, would produce the grand cathedral, the mighty artistic image to moralise, to uplift people and encourage them to be the good.
By their fruits you shall know them. Yeah,
Well,
truth,
guys,
good-
I'm
truth,
going to
goodness, and
take
beauty.
off, but I do want to say one positive thing about the Dutch, because we got Remco here, which is I admire the Dutch in some similar ways because they conquered water. they conquered water. So anyway, I will leave you guys. Good seeing you again, David, and I'll look forward to the next comic book.
Okay,
Okay.
see you, Richard.
See you
Cheers,
later.
Richard. Yeah, good. Yeah. Sure.
Yeah. There was another point, I think. Oh, yeah, it was, you got the sense in the book anyway, where she comes to the idea that, not that, well, there was a part where she was reminiscing about all of that she's learned, and she was saying something like, yeah, maybe, you know, and coming to the conclusion that, yeah, there's probably never going to be a solution to any of the problems going on here. And it's just never going to be. And isn't that like a conclusion? I know, like, a lot of people come to that conclusion. Like, I know, like, well, for me, it was Mark Twain. Mark Twain was a guy, I used to read him when I was a teenager, and he certainly came to that conclusion very quickly. And then, you know, I kind of have been resisting that my whole life, you know, even though I read that when I was a teenager, and I'm 49 now. And I've been resisting that position, but I realize more and more with every passing year. Yeah, what Mark Twain always said, the damned human race, as he always called it. I realized, yeah, it's the humans are just never going to get any better, are they? And there was a little bit.
I should have never evolved them from monkeys. I should have chosen a different species.
Yeah,
it's a monkey in them, you know. They just can't help themselves.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, I suppose Twain's position, he was probably would have looked at himself as being something of a realist. Obviously, a person with tremendous ability in idealism, but something moved him over to a very sort of realistic view of the world.
Mm.
But what were some of the other upshots of the cartoon? What were the things she saw which transformed her views a little bit?
Yeah, it's hard to say that. Like, let me see if I can find some interesting parts here. That anything really going the wrong way. Was transformative. I mean, there were some powerful sequences here where she, you know, is in the museum and, you know, has a lot of emotional experiences with the, but let's see. I'm trying to look. Oh, here we go. All right, let me show you guys this one. Okay, sharing here. This is an interesting one. Share. All right. If we go to you. Okay. Don't you think that if Israel gives them back the territories, there will be less violence? We don't have any proof of that. They can't be trusted, at least not now. If a man tries to shoot you and then drops his gun, are you going to pick it up and hand it back to him? Of course not. You need some proof that he's not going to turn around and shoot you again. You're young, so I understand why you think that giving up the territories is the answer to the problem. But the older you get, the less idealistic and the more grounded you become. Yeah.
Of course, Gaza didn't work out too happily.
Yeah. 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 Okay. Here's where he says, it's not that we don't like Arabs just because we don't like Arabs. We don't like them because they are a threat. Their mission is to throw us into the sea. Why should we help them do that? That's not what most of the Palestinians really want. Most people just want peace, a roof over their heads, jobs. The only reason people resort to violence is because they have nothing and they're living under occupation. You do know how idealistic that sounds, don't you? You would think differently if you lived here a while. You live here. What do you think would fix this mess? It's simple. They just need to evolve in their thinking. They need to grow up. I can't believe you even said that. in all of our conversations about this, you seem to be searching for some kind of meaning to it all. You want it all to be balanced. It's not balanced. Sometimes people are violent for no good reason. Yeah.
Me, the behaviourist, doesn't look at the ideals so much. To me, people can be violent, people can be peaceful, whatever suits their purposes at the time.
I can see why you picked it, David. It's quite a sensitive, well, what can we call it, comic. Yeah, some interesting issues are being brought out. I'm enjoying it.
I really hadn't, I didn't know a whole lot about it before I chose it. But, you know, I mean, there was, you know, certainly a lot of history is covered here.
You know, just jumping in there, you know what comes out for me when I sort of look at these cartoons in our conversation is Yuval Harari. Have you guys read Yuval Harari's books?
No.
No, have you heard of him?
I don't think I have.
Homo Deus,
I actually read all of his books. He has 3 books: *Sapiens*, 21 Lessons for the 21st Century, and what was the third one?
Homo Deus.
*Homo Deus*, yes.
Yeah. Look, I wanted to introduce him because he is an Israeli, and there's lots of YouTube videos of him talking. He is a professor of military history, but his books are very much philosophy. And I found them absolutely fascinating. And the point he makes in his first book is, you know, what distinguishes humans from all other species is that we cooperate, and we cooperate because of narratives, because of stories. But our weakness is that we can't distinguish fact from fiction. And he says, you know, one of the fictions is a country. A country is a fiction, but we make it real. Just like in that cartoon a few moments ago, you're talking about an occupation. Is there really an occupation? What is an occupation? For goodness sake, if you're going on in your day-to-day life, what does it mean to be occupied? I mean, I had this discussion with an Arab in Jerusalem, and I got chucked out of his shop.
I think Remco is trying to push positivism. We're having a very long talk with Heidegger about all that, and he says we've been going down the wrong path. Heidegger said the subjective is real.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing. We do. This is, you know, Heidegger's point. We've lived in a Western culture which, over the past 2,000 or more, 2,500 years, has decided that the only thing that matters is the objective, and has lost sight of the subjective. So when we say a country's not a real thing, then that's very much the positivist argument that what the subjective has created is not real.
Yeah, yeah, and we're making it real, and we're fighting wars about it. We've got ongoing tensions because of that. You know,
we were built by the gods to do that. You see, that's our fate.
I think, Remco, I think there is some form of generalization from your experience with Palestinians who live in Jerusalem and within Israel, who are Israeli citizens, and between the other side, the people who live in the West Bank and Gaza. Those are totally 2 different kinds of Palestinians. The one who stayed in 1948, they called them Arab 48. The ones who stayed took the Israeli citizenship. They have the same rights as any Israeli citizen, and they live in peace and harmony. They work, they can go up the ladder like every Israeli citizen. The others who use the word occupation are the ones who live actually under occupation, because in the space of land they live in, it is they're confined to the space of land. They cannot leave. They are in large prison, and their means of work is determined by the Israelis. If they want to trade, if they want to cross borders, if they want to do anything, they have it's you can it's almost similar to the South African apartheid regime. So those two kinds of Palestinians, they have different experience within Israel and live different lives altogether.
Yeah, that may be, but you know, I got a profound sense when I was in Israel talking with both sides that, you know, this distinction is self-imposed. I immigrated to Australia at the age of 7. My parents said, right, we're now Australians. We will speak English at home. We are now Australians, and that was it. It was the end of the story. There was no sort of hanging on to an identity. You know, why would I want to hang on to anything? I mean, if you want to immigrate, take it or leave it.
Can you still speak a little Dutch?
I'm fluent in it.
Oh, okay, good,
Because
good.
my grandmother came, my grandmother emigrated and she never learned English, so I had to maintain my Dutch. And yeah, I speak fluent Dutch. But the point I want to make is I have no sympathy for this nationalism, none at all. It's, you know, J.D. Krishnamurti made a speech at the United Nations and he called it an act of violence.
But what nationalism are you talking about? I don't get your point. What do you mean by immigration? Who's immigrating?
Well, I was just talking about myself. I'm just taking an example of an attitude that I have, and I'm testing that against you guys. And I'm just saying, look, you know, if you want to live in the country, you accept it or move out. Accept, change, or leave. And if you, you know, we accept it. We adopt it to become Australian. I'm still an arrogant Dutchman in the eyes of some, but anyway, the point remains: I'm Australian. I live here. Why would you want to hold on to something?
You were free to immigrate to Australia. That was a choice you made. While the Palestinians, they had no choice. People from the outside came and occupied their country, so they had no other choice. It's not an immigration. They haven't immigrated anywhere. They live on their lands, and they got occupiers that forced them to live a lifestyle that, you know, depends on. It's not immigration. They didn't adopt that country as a new land. That's the land they knew for generations. So I think it's a different story. So it's not that the comparison is not that similar.
Look, I got thrown out of that Jerusalem shop because the guy was talking about occupation, about this is an American puppet state. Without American support, it would collapse. And I said, well, hang on, 99% of the GDP is locally generated. Only 1% comes from the Americans. And I don't see an American flag. I do see American technology around you. And, you know, I challenged his narrative. I mean, this is all about a narrative. And let's be clear, it's a narrative. It's not reality. Reality is if you are an Arab, you can live with a much higher standard of living than if you went across into Ramallah or, you know, into the West Bank. And a lot of the West Bankers go to Israel to work. And, you know, you got to ask yourself, what's this about? This is about a flag. You have all your freedoms. You can have mosques blaring. There are mosques blaring right through Israel. I was staying in Haifa, and there were mosques with their blaring at 5 o'clock in the morning. So what's the problem, guys?
Yeah, but that's, again, you're comparing people who live in Israel and people who live under occupation in Gaza and the Strip. So it's different. It's not similar. You need, I think it would be, there is not a documentary, there is a movie called Omar, O-M-A-R. And it depicts how the lives under, in Gaza and the Strip, in the West Bank. So I think that will give you a clearer idea than people who live in Israel per se, because it's a totally different, it's two different countries. The lifestyle is different. You're talking about they can go in and work, not necessarily. They need permits, and if they don't get those permits, they can't work. and work in Gaza and the in West Bank is very limited. There is also a documentary called Born in Gaza. It's on Netflix, and it will show you how children live and what are. I think if you want to see a movie about Gaza, you should see Born in Gaza on Netflix. And it's reality. It shows you how people are living in that part of the world. It's not the same as Palestinians living in Jerusalem.
But you can't make a comparison. If you push, then people will push back. If you have a certain attitude, you will get that attitude back in a different way. What I'm saying is these Palestinians or West Bank people are pushing their against a sense of occupation. But that's a myth. If they dropped it, they would live like their fellow Arabs within Israel, who have a much higher standard of living and can practice whatever they want to do with complete freedoms. As I said, the mosques. I mean, 4 to 5 times a day, their mosques will be blaring, and you could do whatever you want. What's this occupation? It's a story. It's sitting there, not real. Get over it, guys.
I totally disagree. I'm sorry, because I've studied both ends, and it's not. Yes, you are talking about the Arabs living in Israel, and yes, that's the case, but it's not the case in the occupied land. It's different.
No, because they're fighting. They're out there they're resisting something. They're resisting the occupation.
Actually, they just want basic human rights. They want running water. They want sewage. They want the freedom to live and to send their kids to school. They want all the basic rights that your kids enjoy, and they don't have it. A kid of 7 years old is working in a trash collecting job because all the schools been bombed, and so it's not as easy as. I really recommend watching Born in Gaza if you have Netflix. It's reality, and it's a documentary, so it's not a movie. It will show you how people are actually living. It's from a point of view of children who live in Gaza.
Yeah, but you seem to be blind-eyeing the fact that they are
I'll tell you something. If 12 boys were playing soccer on the beach in Gaza, and they were shelled, and only 2 survived. The 2 who survived, they live in this trauma over and over because they lost their cousins, their friends, their brothers. And this is just one story of a group. And this is just repetitive in schools, in public squares. It's not human condition that we live in. It's totally different. And people want peace. But every time they lay out a plan for peace, it's always even the 2-state solutions, like the last peace deal that Kushner worked on. I read it, all the pages, 180 pages of it. It is a formalized form of occupation. There is no sovereignty to the land. There is no sovereignty to the ports. Everything that goes out. If you trade, it has to go by approval. You can't have an army. You can't have a police. You can't have anything. So basically, it's status quo, just an elevated form of it. So it's not even 2-state solution. You cannot say it's the result of this peace deal cannot be a 2 states. It will be 1 state and 1 apartheid regime again.
Now, Sana, why do the 1.5 million Arabs live quite happily and peaceful within Israel?
Because they are citizens. They have the same rights. It's a democracy. Israel is a democracy. They are discriminated somehow, but not occupied. So they are a minority.
So basically you're rejecting the notion that it's free choice that creates this, because that's what it is in my view. You're making a choice and you got to live with it. Just like my example of those Arabs that I met on the roof of that hotel. And they said they were bitter about the fact that I could, as a foreigner, go to that nightclub and they couldn't, which it really had me sitting on my edge of my chair. I said, wow, that's horrible, until I discovered the reason, and it was a free choice. They made a choice and they're not prepared to accept it.
Right, but those are they are Israeli citizens. The people in Gaza and the West Bank, they are not, and they will be never given an Israeli citizenship, because that will tip over the balance. They won't be minorities anymore. So that's not a solution. That would never happen.
No, because they can't accept, they're resisting something which is gradually happening.
Even if they accept it, they would not give them citizenship. It's not offered. Those people got their citizenship in 1948 at the beginning, at the formation of the State of Israel. So it was a different situation altogether. Israel was a different country then. But right now, Israeli citizens, they will never give Arabs, Palestinians, Israeli citizenship, because that will give them a voice to vote, to change government, to overpopulate the country and become majority. So it will never happen. And as long as you're not a citizen, you're not equal. I recommend watching that documentary. I think it's very helpful to understand how people are living.
It looks like it's on Netflix.
Yes, it is on Netflix.
I never use Netflix, so might be some of it on YouTube.
There's lots of ways to see things.
Yes, that's true.
There is, and what I would be seeing would be the symptoms of an attitude, and it wouldn't change anything. I would still be saying, yeah, but why is that? Why? And because there's resistance, there's a sense of being occupied. There's a sense of nationalism, sense of holding on to the story. And the reality is inevitable. I mean, Israel is going to absorb the West Bank in time. Within a few decades, there won't be a West Bank anymore. They'll be totally absorbed. They'll be totally absorbed. And there are already people within the West Bank who are saying we need to just accept the inevitable. If they have a medical problem, they go across the border into Israel to go to hospital.
Not all. No, not all. Only if you have permission.
Yes, I know that. But the point is, it is an inevitable outcome. And I mean, goodness sake, I mean, look at Europe, look at the map of Europe, look at Poland, Germany, where the boundaries have moved, before World War II, after World War II. Things come and go, and, now they're unified. Get over it, guys. Just move on, get a life. That's my...
but if you're taking the European example, we would have said the same thing about the satellite states that were under the USSR. They all revolted because they wanted freedom. So it's nothing new. This is how history is. We're talking about European countries who revolted against every occupier, and the USSR was occupying all the Iron Curtain states, and one by one they did revolt, they got their freedom, and now they are independent countries and their citizens are free.
Is it any different before and after the meltdown of the Soviet Union? I think not. I think that freedom is a myth. I think freedom is...
Oh my God, no way. Compare East and West Germany. I'm sorry, no. It's a different lifestyle, it's different economics, it's different... Can you compare the freedoms in East Germany with the freedoms in West Germany? People were fleeing. That's why they erected the Berlin Wall, because people were fleeing from East to West because they had no freedoms. Their economic situation was different. People by the millions started storming out.
Yeah.
People want freedom. They want equal rights like everybody else. It's not just nationalism. It's just basic human rights. People in East Germany, they lived like they were in a prison camp, and they all fled to the West.
So is life superior in the Palestinian territories compared to what it is in Israel? Do you think that people would, if they were suddenly part of Israel, do you think their lives would be worse than what it is at the moment? I think not.
Watch the documentary and then we can talk about it.
It won't make any difference to me. It will make zero difference because it's still a situation.
But,
of what
but
it
you'll
is.
see it. You'll see it for what it is. You'll see the situation as is, and then you can tell me if it's the same as the one you saw in Jerusalem. There is no nightclubs. There is no clubs whatsoever. You barely can get a school. School becomes refugee camps when your building is shelled and bombed. It's a war zone. It's not a regular country. It's a war zone. And war zones are different. People live on high alert. And there is so much trauma, especially among young children. So those young children who lived in a state of trauma, losing a brother, a cousin, what opportunities do they have when they are 17? So when a group comes and tell them, yes, you need to revenge the killing of your brothers, your family, what choice do they have? It's very easy to brainwash them because they have no opportunities whatsoever. They have no education. They have no jobs, nothing. So we cannot just say people in Jerusalem live in the same way. You know, the people in Jerusalem are like sad because they cannot go to the local nightclub. Imagine people sleeping without dinner and food for an entire, week. It's a different story. We can move on. I think I think we're stuck.
It's hard to argue
because
against.
because I feel you're stuck into a situation of a war zone, and it's an attitude. And until the people will just let go of it, it will just continue. Nothing will ever change my
But
view.
it's not an attitude. It's not an attitude. You're talking about when the guy told you that Israel is a puppet state for the U.S. and you said it's an attitude. It's not an attitude. Israel gets funded by the U.S. If you take all the funding that the U.S. allocates for the Israelis, it comes out $500 per year per citizen in Israel. They get the money, they get the technology, they get the arms, they get the packing in major in the UN, in every international organization. So they are allies in the area, and they get a lot of packing from the U.S. The lobbyists in the U.S. are working for the Israeli cause. So it's not a puppet, but it's a big ally in the region, and there is few of them too.
1% of GDP, that's all the Americans give. And it's probably less than what the Palestinians get from the Americans.
Well, now the Palestinians get nothing from the Americans. They stopped supporting UNRWA. They stopped it when Trump came to power.
Yeah,
so they get nothing.
It's nothing, 1%. Let's not make it bigger than it is. It's really 99% of Israel is Israel.
Okay, it's $500 per person, and the stimulus check that people got for Corona here in the U.S. and they were U.S. citizens. They got between $600 to $1,200. So you're comparing, it's 1%, but it's money for people who don't need it. We could get it here in the U.S. for our citizens. I'll take the $500.
Yeah. It's obviously very costly money because you're making a drama out of very little. I just stay with the 99%, thank you. And I look at a country that is self-reliant, has pulled itself up, is inclusive. I spent time in Jordan, I spent time in Syria and Egypt. And I love the Muslim people, they're gorgeous people. And just like I find the Israeli people gorgeous people, and but what's coming in the way is nationalism, a lot of corruption, and particularly in the West Bank. I mean, good, look at Yasser Arafat. He took billions out, and that's an order that his wife took billions when she went to live in Paris. She took it out from the people. It's a failed state.
That's true. But if you had bad lawyers, that doesn't make your case any less legitimate.
What's your future? There is no future in the West Bank and in the Gaza Strip. There's nothing. Just
True.
darkness.
That's true. That's true. I
Get
agree.
over it. Move
Yeah,
on.
but they have no other choice. What other choice do they have? They're not becoming
No.
Israeli citizens. That's for sure. They're not given the chance to do it. Some people will take it if they had the chance because they are at their last, uh, they're dying. They can take anything, but they're not given that choice.
Oh, I'm done, David. I can't add anything. I've said my view, and I guess I feel that nationalism has got a big price, and I think it's.
And there are those of us who love nationalism to our
Really?
dying breath.
Mm.
What do you do with them?
I feel sorry for them.
Well, I just don't see that there's any universal values. It's very much the left is very preoccupied with this idea that there's a universal truth that suits everybody, and that's where I differ. I doubt that very much.
Well, I mean, it's holding on to an identity, and that identity is very costly. And I live in Australia, and I just accept that I'm an Australian.
Well, okay. The day you lose your identity is the day you'll get walked all over.
Oh, really? Wow. I don't get that.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's there's people with very different ways of viewing things. You think that the whole of humanity is just going to walk arm in arm and prance along like it's the Wizard of Oz or something, and on the rare occasion it can look like that, but when they start competing for resources, it becomes very different. The world's only so big. You'll have more and more people, and when there's not enough to go around, they'll fight each other tooth and nail for possession of the planet.
Until World War I, passports were a rarity. You could just move anywhere around the world. That was introduced because of suspicion, and it was at that point that nationalism started to become significant. You had your little fiefdoms, but by and large you could move freely. And that's been the curse of society. That I think we're going to look back in a couple of centuries' time and say, that was a mistake, fellas. That was a mistake. In the resource allocation.
Basically, it used to be very expensive to travel. And it was only people of quality which tended to be able to travel around easily. And you didn't worry about the people of quality. But then the riffraff started travelling around the world, and of course they had to introduce passports. But of course, the funny thing is, in the past, like even in England, if you were a commoner, you had to have papers just to travel from one place to another in England. They'll arrest you if you're a commoner and you tried to travel to another county or something like that, where you were unknown. If you're a rich toff, no problem. You had to get papers signed often by the churchman in the village that would allow you to go some distance to see a relative. And that'll be back. There'll be a time soon where you'll need documentation. They won't allow you to travel freely within your own nation. That'll become the norm. It's a happy, bright future coming along.
I hope you're wrong. I hope you're totally 100% wrong. I think there's a future for us, but we need to give up this notion of fiefdoms. And that's really what we're dealing with, latter-day fiefdoms, in which the club of all fiefdoms is the so-called United Nations. There's another way of living, and that's available to us, but we have to give up this notion of boundaries.
Remco, be my guest. Go and create Shangri-La somewhere and see if it works. It's my argument always with the socialist, Marxist, communist, whatever you like to call them. I said, Yeah, you guys go and do it. Go and set up a commune, you know, show us how it works. And it's been tried. And the ideal sounds nice. And when they try it out, they find, well, unfortunately, it doesn't work out.
In 1500, we were ruled by the church, and gradually the church had its powers eroded. We're now living under Rajas that feel that they have a need, that we have to defer to them. There is no need. It's like it's a show of actors, and Trump is showing this up. We're going a little bit off the topic, I suppose, but I really need to say it. These people have had their day, and they're fading, and that is gradually happening. They don't have much of a role today. The world is very different already. And we don't need these people running, you know, whether it be Canberra or Jerusalem or Washington. They really have very little influence in reality. But we haven't got over it yet. We're still fighting for this old modality, and we believe that these people have some influence in the world. They're creating the problems that we are dealing with in our lives. These people that are suffering in the West Bank are suffering because of people like Abbas and Netanyahu. Not because of them, it's the Netanyahu and Abbas. They're gradually being seen for what they are. That's why what's happening, and that's why Trump got elected. He's just an actor. The people saw right through him, prepared to accept all his lies, because really it didn't matter. Because
what lies has Donald Trump told?
What lies?
Yeah.
20,000 according to the New York Times.
Yeah, but what are they? Because I looked at, you know, a list of these lies he told, and they might be exaggerations, but a lot of stuff you couldn't call lies, deliberate falsehoods. So I wonder how true that claim is. I just see the left is full of it.
Anyway,
look, I used to be a lefty. Remember that? I spent most of my life as a lefty.
Look, I was just going back to nationalism. I was just trying to keep it into Israel. I was just trying to make a point that a lot of these things are in the heads of people. It's not the reality. And if you let go of that, then a whole lot of things start to melt away, because you start.
Yeah. But the subjective is our entire mind is subjective.
Look,
so you're going to get rid of all of it?
It's an attitude that you're holding on to. You say, oh, this is objective, this is subjective. It's an attitude. It's your attitude. You let it go.
Yeah, but Remco, I think you need to distinguish between the voices and the actual, like Trump and others and Netanyahu and all. They found a problem and they became the advocate for the problem. Although they are bad advocates, but there is a problem and we need to address that. People voted for Trump because there is a problem. People are disenfranchised by globalization and losing their jobs to Mexico and China, living in if you go to rural the US, in Wisconsin and other states that actually voted for Trump, that they used to vote for the other side, for the Democrats, for a long time. They are the people who they call the Rust Belt. All the factories they worked in closed. Their standards of living went down. Drugs and alcohol is rampant. So there is a problem. Trump does not make the problem any less of a problem. We need to address that. So this is what I'm trying to reach and tell you. Like, even with the Palestinians, you spoke about Arafat and others. That doesn't make, if you have a bad lawyer, that doesn't make your case any less legitimate. So don't throw the baby with the bathwater.
There's another meeting in Melbourne where we have an agnostics meeting, which is run by a guy called David Miller, who's, oddly enough, his father was a Jew that left the kibbutz in Israel and left Israel or Palestine altogether. He went the opposite way. His father I think he became Muslim, served in the Turkish army, and then he came to Australia and became a Jehovah's Witness. So poor David was brought up as a Jehovah's Witness. It's affected his life forever.
Wow.
Yeah, he's a local Melbourne identity. So yeah, I put up the link, the Zoom link for the agnostics group, and that's in a little bit less than 1.5 hours from now.
Yeah, I put it on the calendar actually, on our group. I think I deleted it just a little while ago.
So I don't know, Remco, if you want to zoom into an agnostics group meeting.
Look, I went and joined that one with David Miller once, and he wants to dominate it and adjudicate everything, and I wasn't. I'd like to have a conversation.
Oh, right. Yeah. I never thought of it that way. You think he was a bit too dominant?
Yeah.
I actually probably agree with you. He's a little bit harder nosed than he used to be. He's getting pretty old now. He's in his 84 now, David. But yeah, it was interesting. He told me that once. Yeah, his dad was born in a kibbutz, had a Russian name before World War I, and it seems to have decided to become Islam, and then joined the Turkish army in World War I, and then migrated to Australia after World War I.
This is a colorful life he lived. He got a piece of everything.
Yeah. It's amazing to think what his dad must have been like. I assume his I never asked him that much about his dad when his dad died. Maybe David should do a paper on his dad.
But if I could take the conversation back to where we were, I think a lot of the problems are about an attitude, and the attitude was probably expressed. When the Europeans invaded North America, the Indians had, my understanding, had no sense of land ownership. And I think this is where the source of the problem, as it continues to ripple around the world, and is this sense of it's the state that is supreme to the people. So like in Turkey, where Erdogan is resisting the Kurds, will actually invade Syria to prevent any expression of Kurdistan, which would then possibly lead to a separation of some of his territory within Turkey. I mean, what right does a man living in Ankara have to tell the people in a particular part that they should be ruled from Ankara and not from their own region? And I think that is that attitude. And when you actually go and analyze and think about it, what difference does it really make? I mean, it's a bit like Czechoslovakia, 93, when it split. It split. Was there a war over it? Nope. When Brexit, I think one person lost their life over Brexit. It was some British lady MP got stabbed, I think. But that was it, one life.
You are contradicting yourself, because now the Kurds are nationalists, and they aim to have a country of their own. So if what you're saying should be across all sides, you should not support the Kurds call for a country of their own either. So what's the matter? It's the same thing. Why shouldn't if the Palestinians should agree to being ruled from Tel Aviv, why shouldn't the Kurds be ruled from Istanbul? This is your argument. So I'm just stating your argument again.
Yeah, sure. But I mean, what does it matter if the Kurds want to practice it and they say, look, we want to be ruled from our own capital? What's wrong with that? What, let them be? I'd say
exactly. And the Palestinians have the same rights as the Kurds.
Yeah, and it's like Nagorno, what's that name? That place, Nagorno-Karabakh, or that area between
Azerbaijan and Armenia. Yes.
Yeah, what are they fighting over? Whether we're going to be ruled from what's the capital of Armenia? Yerevan? Whatever
Yerevan.
It is. Yeah, okay, it's their business. If they want it, go for it. Huh? What's holding on to something?
But exactly, the Palestinians also they need the choice of having their own place. Exactly.
There's actually a little bit of land in Australia where we could establish Shangri-La. It's that land around the Ord River. I don't think it's ever really been developed.
Okay.
Oh yeah, it's just lovely. They got this. It's right up in the north of Australia, so they dam this river, and so they can irrigate this piece of land. And I don't think it's really ever been utilised that well. And this is a place where we all get together and go and create our new state called Shangri-La, where we all live in accordance with Remco's philosophy. Remco could be sort of like our high priest of the
We need philosophers king.
humanism. I'll just see how long before there's too many people and they start smacking each other in the face or something like that.
Exactly.
You know, you could say it's unrealistic, but I've had a lot of pivotal experiences, including being thrown out of that Jerusalem tourist shop. But one of the other ones was going to the Burning Man, which is just up from you there, David, and in Nevada. And I spent 10 days there, and it was just, I guess you've heard of the Burning Man, have you, Stephen and Sana?
Of course, yes.
Yeah, and just an extraordinary experience where this place on a dried lake bed, and some 60,000 people just congregate to this place, and there's absolutely no exchange of anything. It's all, well, exchange for money, that is, and it is just this freedom, this extraordinary freedom and generosity of spirit. And I thought, this is the new order. This is what is possible.
I agree, but it's utopia. It's hard to achieve.
It's utopia. It's possible. It will happen. I think we're still living. Look, we had the church in 1500.
Sorry, what was the name of this Burning Man?
Burning Man.
Burning Man.
All right. No, not that familiar with it. No.
It's like a festival. It's an art festival.
Yeah, it's an art festival.
Oh, right.
But you know, I just got up every morning and got on my bicycle at 7 o'clock in the morning and drove out onto the playa, and I just met all of these people. There was just extraordinary freedoms, and everything was freely available, and yeah, that to me was utopia, and that's what's possible. And I think what we're dealing with, we're dealing with the end of an era. That's what I'm seeing. That we've had the church supreme in 1500, and it's gradually being faded and replaced by the state. And I think that's now being challenged. So we're entering a new order, and I think we're seeing that we'll probably go through a bit of trauma over the next century. But I'm seeing an ending of.
Oh well, the Hegelian is at work. You know, I better put out a Hegelian alert here.
This is David's expertise, the orders, the purples, the greens, the yellows. We're waiting for the new
Hegel's grand vision. Hegel's grand vision was that, you know, there'll be strife for a while, but eventually it'll all work itself out. So I'm critical of Hegel because I think he looked at our realities if it was something living in a closed system, in a sandbox. And I think Hegel missed chaos. He doesn't understand mutation, chaos. He could only understand the cardinal and the fixed concepts, but not the mutable concept. But this is Dostoevsky. Dostoevsky was the complete opposite of you, Remco. He was the one saying that there is something in human nature you could create the most perfect reality. You could create the Garden of Eden. And there's something in human nature. I think Jordan Peterson's, got that little bit on YouTube where he makes that point that there's something in human nature that one day will smash things just to prove it is free. I should put that up, actually. I should look for that bit for Remco, and he can have a good view of that one, I think.
Recommended reading for anybody that's got a bit of a Hobbesian, and you sound like a bit of a Hobbesian, Stephen.
Oh, you're talking about the master's name should not be taken lightly.
I really, really recommend the book Humankind by Rutger Brechtman, and it was written by a Dutchman, and it's very popular at the moment. And he pulls the rug out of any sort of Hobbesian thinking, you know, like the experiments done by Milgram and by Zimbardo. You know, was it Yale or Princeton University, where you had the prisoners and students acting out. Do you know what I'm talking about, by the way, before I carry on? The Milgram experiments?
No.
Oh, well, they were done by a psychologist, Milgram, and by Zimbardo, and they had people, students, sitting in booths with white-coated people. They're saying, you know, pretending to do an experiment, and they said, "You must."
Okay, I brought it up. Yeah.
Yeah,
I have heard of it,
these
actually. Yeah, I have heard
experiments
there was a bit of a controversy around it.
Yeah, they're fake, and so much of what we think is a condition, and Breckman just pulls the rug out of all of that thinking. You know, we're basically good people. We're basically
Here we are. It's coming out now. But the humanism that we're basically all goods. Nietzsche's going to choke on that one. You know, it's.
Well, I have in my 70 years. I have not met a bad person. That's what I say. I have not met a bad person.
I've never met a person I didn't like. That was the American diplomat, wasn't it? Yeah, if I can find that. It's not quite what. Don't know if that. Right.
Anyway, humankind, it's a great antidote to any Hobbesian thinking and thinking, you know.
So what happened on Pitcairn Island?
Pitcairn Island, are you talking about the survivors of the Mutiny of Bounty?
Yeah, there was 12 men and 12 women. They went to Pitcairn Island. I think half of them were natives. All the women were natives, so there were six Englishmen or whatever they were, and 6 natives. They needed them for crew to sail the ship, and of course they wanted women as well, so they kidnapped 12 women. And they all went to Pitcairn Island, and after a decade, there was 1 man left. A few died of other causes, but most died by violence. So there was a utopia, paradise lost.
Well, I don't know about the story, and you know, there's always exceptions to, you know, to talk about a small group and then to make an inductive statement is a bit dangerous.
Well, that's what the local humanist group was doing in Canberra, weren't they? They were discussing what was it? What was the name of it again? That book, that famous story about the beast within. Damn, it's silly of me. This famous science fiction author wrote it. It was about a story about a group of schoolboys who ended up on an island. And
William Golding.
Lord of the Flies. Yeah, there was the Canberra humanists were discussing that and saying there was an example of some schoolboys that ended up on an island where they're all nice to each other. But again, that was just being anecdotal.
Yeah, that book got the Nobel Prize, and it just totally destroyed. It was based on a false assumption. There was no evidence. I mean, I don't know about the Pitcairn Island story, but you know, by and large, people just don't even shoot each other. They don't even want to shoot each other. They will kill each other if they can do it remotely. If they can do it from an aeroplane, they can do it from a button, but face to face, they can't do it because they're basically kind and considerate people.
Oh, there we go again. Basically kind and good. Right.
Yes.
The world according to Remco.
You had different experiences, obviously.
Oh, no. I think people appear kind when things are going well because appearing to be kind is very, very handy. You know, I say within a social group,
You know, unfortunately,
people-
history has a lot of examples about people killing their neighbors in Cambodia, in Rwanda,
well, the
in
breakup of Yugoslavia was a beautiful example.
Yugoslavia. Exactly. We keep having. We're still seeing that the Rohingyas, it's still happening. Unfortunately, I love your world, Remco. I wish I can live in it, but reality is different.
Yeah, but you know,
I want to move and live where you are. It sounds like a better place.
We've got a comic on the schedule that's going to cover the war in Eastern Bosnia in the 90s.
Oh, nice.
We can do that one next week if we want.
Okay.
If we
Okay.
want.
Yeah.
Sounds
Or in a
good.
month, whatever.
Maybe something lighter. Give us one heavy comic, one light comic.
Well, next week is Invisible Ink. I have it on the schedule, but
Okay.
I'm open to suggestions, but we can talk about
Good.
that if anybody wants to. The thing of it
Right,
is,
yeah, it was Jordan Peterson on Dostoevsky's Messengers from, what was it, the Underground? Notes from the Underground, yeah, where Peterson takes Dostoevsky's points that is completely the opposite.
Completely opposite of.
Oh, the idea that there's an intrinsic goodness in humanity.
Yeah.
That, you know, if you created the perfect society, somebody's going to want to smash it.
I don't mind that as a topic, but
I'm not suggesting it. I'm not suggesting. I think we better stick with comic books, actually.
I would. If I don't suppose anybody knows who Adam Curtis is, but I would highly recommend watching his documentaries. You can find them all on YouTube. Adam Curtis.
All right.
Watch all of them. They'll take you a while, but you can watch them. They're all free on YouTube. You can watch his documentaries. Beautiful, beautifully done. Adam Curtis.
What is it about?
Curtis. Oh, they're great. They're great stuff. Great stuff. If we're going to talk about topics like this.
Okay. Look forward to it.
Okay, his favourite theme is power and how it works in society.
Power and how it works. Yeah, the Power Nightmares, the Trap. They're all on YouTube. You can watch them.
So Adam,
I think everybody should watch them. Everybody should watch those things.
So which part of Australia are you in, Remco?
I'm in the West, in Perth.
Perth, all right. Now,
Yeah.
keep that in
Well,
mind. And Sana, you're in America somewhere, are you?
yeah, I'm in Phoenix, Arizona.
Phoenix, Arizona. Okay, cool.
Mm.
Yeah, oh, well.
You know,
was
I
fun.
just wanted to say, can I just jump back just a moment? You mentioned Yugoslavia and the breakup. Don't forget that Yugoslavia was celebrating they were commemorating the Turks and a massacre of the Turks. And every year, like the Orangemen whereabouts in Ireland was it? They would do a march celebrating the Battle of the Boyne. That's right. So you've got this entrenched hatred, and so when you try to break up the country, you're dealing with this legacy of centuries of thinking. So don't you? I'm suggesting caution before you pounce on Yugoslavia and say, oh, look what happened over there. That was a country that had a sick attitude, preserving some hurt that they experienced in 20 or something when the Turks came in. So a lot of these things have got to be looked at and say, well, what is actually behind it? And behind it was basically prejudice. And that prejudice was expressed when the country broke up. That's what I'm saying. I'm passionately opposed to nationalism because it doesn't stand up to scrutiny.
My great-grandfather was an Orange man. I've got his fist.
Yeah. So therefore, in Northern Ireland, you can go around and you still see the barbed wire fences. Huh? Yeah.
That's what humanity's meant to do. It's survival of the fittest. It's the eternal fight. It's like a science fiction show, Babylon 5. Remember the Shadow and the Borlons? And the Shadow were, explaining their philosophy, I think, at the end of the third season, where the Shadow was they were explaining the idea that, you know, this struggle for survival would produce the greater being.
That, Stephen,
Yes.
is a myth, mate. That is a myth, the survival of the fittest. That was Darwin with his Victorian lenses on, going around. He was a brilliant man, no question of it. But it was
He's taking his glasses off, David. He's getting dangerous.
It's not survival of the fittest. This is about cooperation. This is the cooperative. It's a myth, and we need to get it. It was just a Victorian man fixing his jaundiced view on this.
So what you're saying, Remco, is you are right, and everybody must agree with you.
No, I'm not saying right or wrong at all. And Darwin's theory of evolution is perfect, except that it was in the end, in coming up with the same outcome, it isn't so much the survival of the fittest. It was cooperation that leads to the evolution of the species. And that's nothing new. That's for me. You can read.
Yeah, but cooperation happens within your own tribe to survive, actually.
Yes.
So survival is based on your tribes and
Yes.
how well they will protect you, because one person at a time could not survive a lion attack, a group of robbers. So you needed a group, you needed a tribe, and your loyalty was within that tribe, and cooperation happened within that tribe. But when it comes to other tribes, there was competition for food, competition for resources. So that's where conflict started. So there is cooperation, but also there's conflict between and within. So that's the difference. So survivalism is the base. I'm not saying the fittest, but I mean survivalism is what bounds us to our group and makes the others a threat.
Yeah, but the first step is cooperation. The first step is bonding. And then when resources were challenged, only then do we get confrontation. And often that confrontation was as a result of surpluses, whether it was agricultural surpluses that were usurped by the rulers of the tribe, who then translated some of that surplus into weapons.
Right, but in our DNA, we can't separate that. Like, although we have resources now, but even within, like, if you are within one soccer league, you and the others are your enemy somehow. So it's like we inherited this us and others mentality, even if the resources are not scarce anymore. So it's something in our, in our being, and we need to overcome that.
That was also famously pursued in the fictional story Assassin's Creed,
Mm-hmm.
where you had the two sides fighting against each other. One they'd assume, all through history, they'd assume sides, and one side wanted to create a world where the ability, free will, was removed, so that would create a peaceful world. But the assassins were the ones who were fighting to retain free will, even though it meant an imperfect world. Oh, come on, David, you must have been up on Assassin's Creed. Yes, no?
No.
Oh, God, you missed out on the philosophy of Assassin's Creed. You got to get into that. That's phenomenal, that one.
Well, maybe we could do that one. I don't mind.
Yeah, I couldn't really say there's anything in particular. You really need something that sort of, I don't know, you'd need a work that would sort of indicate the entire, thing, sort of properly. I don't know of any particular.
I can think of a story where the character in the story wanted to unite, well, it was actually in the 80s, there was America and Russia, so there wouldn't be a nuclear war. And so he created this hoax where an alien attacked New York. And because of the hoax pretending to get everybody to believe that mankind was about to be attacked by alien invaders, that the entire globe would come together as one to attack a common threat to them.
This Watchmen.
That's the one. Yeah, that's the one. Yeah.
Good show. I
Independence
like the
Day.
movie.
Well, the movie was a little different from the book, actually.
Yeah, there's a little 2.5 minutes of the shadow philosophy of creating the better beings by survival of the fittest.
But that actually wouldn't solve anything, though, because all you did is you just expanded the problem. And
What's that?
it's still the same as us versus them. You just created a new them, but
Exactly.
that's the same problem.
Right.
Oh yeah, but in the story, it did work, and that was what was his name? Rorschach.
Well,
Rorschach was the one that wanted to spill the beans on it, wasn't he?
yeah.
But at least, David, the cooperation became within the larger group of humans. So that
Yeah,
maybe
but what I'm
that's a
saying is
good
that
outcome.
just, yeah, that's what I'm
It's,
saying. You
it's the
just
same
say,
concept. We just expanded the cooperation with between humans against the common enemy.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what it takes to bring humans together. An alien invasion.
yeah, but what I'm saying is really that wouldn't work, because all that does is just distribute
same
the
thing.
problem
Yeah,
to
that's
another.
Right.
But
Guys,
anyway.
I must leave. I've got to go. And
Me too.
look, and I loved your perspective, Sana. You got a lovely voice too. I find it
Oh,
very,
thank you, Remco.
very
Thank you.
compliments.
Always good to have you here, Remco. Hope we can see you.
Yeah,
again
it's
soon.
been interesting. I just put up this is the view from my study that you can see, and
Oh,
you
it's
can see my
beautiful.
couple of kangaroos that are just in my front lawn. That's just my view out. I'm only half an hour out of Perth, but I might as well be the end of the world, because we live on the edge of a national park, or in a national park actually, and so it's quite. And that's how I survive, because I have no time for the bullshit that's around and all the drama and all that. It's all created out of myths and mythologies. My view.
Enjoy it before we destroy it.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Sana. Been lovely conversation. David, thank you very much for letting me in, and hopefully I didn't say too much. But I always enjoy coming in here, and I love intelligent conversations, and I like being challenged too, in particular, Stephen. I don't mind having a challenge, and in fact, I enjoy it. But anyway, I better go. Thanks, guys.
Okay, yeah. See you later,
Talking to you.
Remco.
Catch you later.
Bye-bye. Bye all.
Bye.
Bye, Rem.
I have
Yeah.
to
Oh
go
well, I
too.
suppose
It's
it's
my
time for all of
bedtime.
us to go, I think.
Okay.
Yes.
But yeah, Sana, did you get very far with Wilbur and Integral by the last time we talked?
Well, I'm trying my best. I have so much, there is so much to read, so much to see. It's like overload of information.
I know that, but the thing of it was you were asking for a theory of everything, and
theory
I'm
of
just telling
everything,
you,
yes.
this one is
It is.
worthwhile to pay attention to.
Right. It's just I just go on like, I see a thread and I follow, then I have to follow it till the end and go back to the original.
Yeah.
So
It seems that this is a huge shortcut, though. I really do think so, because it's a really working model. It's a working map
yes.
that you can use
Yes.
that will help you in following those threads that you're talking about.
Exactly,
This is
yes.
a good map
Yes.
to help in that.
Exactly. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, that's true. That's true. Well, thank you guys. Thank you for having me. Sorry if I overstepped a little bit.
I hope you
No,
come
no,
back. I
no,
hope
no, no
to see
problem
you
there.
more than I have, Sana.
But
Okay,
I don't like feelings. I like facts, and I go by facts. So that's it.
I hope
Oh no.
right.
Well, Heidegger has corrected us on that.
Okay. All right.
Yeah,
Great.
the
So I'll see you next
subjective
time.
is
Okay.
important. Yeah, see you all next time.
see
Yeah.
you next time, Sana.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.